Ever since Stephen had been hospitalized, Benny visited his owner every day. It was against hospital policy, but they allowed it because the cat was the only thing that made the elderly man happy. But when a doctor noticed something strange, everyone was shocked. Welcome to Wonderbot Animals. Benny's daily visits weren't just to keep Leonardo company. The cat was secretly bringing something for the old man. And Stephen, the doctor who discovered what it was ready to confront him. But what was Leonardo hiding? To discover that, we have to go back to the beginning. Benny the cat had been visiting his grumpy 85-year-old owner, Leonardo, every day since his hospitalization. Although this was against their policy, the hospital had made an exception because it didn't seem like the man had much time left and the cat made him happy. The fact that Benny was extremely friendly with other patients and even the hospital staff was a great help. Everyone loved him and he lifted people's spirits. But as the saying goes, good things don't last. Stephen, one of the doctors who was always on call for Leonardo, had recently begun to notice something unusual. Over the past few days, Benny had been behaving more and more strangely. While the cat had always been happy to see people, things started to change. The cat wasn't spending as much time with other people in the hospital, and Stephen was intrigued by this change of behavior. The first thing the doctor began to wonder was what could have happened in Leonardo's room to change Benny's behavior so much. The doctor himself was a big cat enthusiast, so he was very interested. So he came up with the idea of following Benny when he left the hospital and seeing if that would shed some light. Benny was fairly easy to follow because he walked very calmly and he rubbed up against people's legs if they paid him any attention. Benny was one of the nicest cats he had ever met, so that just made Stephen more eager to learn what happened to make Benny change his behavior. He wanted to help the cat and make him more comfortable again. Eventually, the cat made it to the old house, which was about a 20-minute walk from the hospital, and entered through the cat door. At first, Stephen was very nervous about what he was going to do, but he just walked up to the door and rang the bell. However, no one answered the doorbell, but Stephen knew someone was in the house because he had noticed the curtains move a little. Stephen was sure something was going on there, but he had no idea exactly what. What was certain was that he would watch the cat more closely at the hospital. Unfortunately, Benny didn't show up at the hospital the next day or even the day after. Stephen feared that he had scared the mysterious person inside the house and that he would never allow Benny to return to the hospital, so he was feeling a little guilty about following the cat home. Without Benny, Leonardo's grumpiness escalated and he started to be very mean to everyone. His behavior was terrible and it made everyone's job harder than it needed to be. Eventually, a new visitor showed up. This was strange because no one except Benny had ever visited Leonardo. Stephen discovered that the name of the visitor was Thomas, and it didn't seem like they were related, which was very strange. Additionally, Thomas's visits didn't improve Leonardo's mood very much. One day, Stephen decided he was going to ask Thomas about his relationship with Leonardo. However, the staff had to respect people's privacy, so he didn't have any right to do that. He also didn't have any right to ask Thomas to stop visiting, but Stephen was concerned. Eventually, he communicated those security concerns, and over the next 2 days, Leonardo didn't receive visits. On the first day, he was very angry, but on the second day, he wasn't interacting with anyone. Eventually, Benny went to the hospital again and security alerted Stephen. After all, he had a plan. But before we get to that, please give this video a like to help it reach 7K and subscribe to the channel. Now, when Stephen was alerted, he rushed to Leonardo's room and closed the door. When Benny arrived, the cat didn't know what to do about the closed door, but this gave Stephen time to sneak up on Benny and try to pick the animal up. Usually, the cat was very sweet, but to Stephen's surprise, the cat didn't want to be held. So he went out of Stephen's grasp and this started a chase. Stephen knew he looked ridiculous chasing a cat around the hospital, but eventually Benny entered an office by mistake, and that allowed Stephen to close the door and try to grab the cat. The first few times, Stephen got some scratches, but he managed to get a hold of Benny. Finally, Stephen had a chance to try to get to the bottom of things. When he looked closer at Benny's collar, it turned out there was a hidden compartment on the collar. It was the size of a battery, and there seemed to be a pressure system. When activated, the cat was pleasant and calm. So, Stephen started to understand that the cat was trained to bring things to Benny using the little compartment on his collar. But what was the cat bringing to Leonardo? When he finally managed to open the compartment, Stephen was shocked. There was a white powder inside. It all started to make sense, and his first instinct was to run to Leonardo's room and confront the old man. He was exploiting Benny, and that made Stephen very angry. He was such a sweet cat, he didn't deserve to be treated that way. However, Stephen had to play it smart. He decided that the best thing he could do was call the police. Stephen and the hospital staff provided all the information they could. The police said they would contact Thomas, and when he was confronted by the police, he knew there was no way out of it, and he might as well be honest. Eventually, the police went to the house, and no one opened the door, but they had a warrant, so they broke in. In the house, they found 2 people who claimed to be members of Leonardo's family, but they turned out to be his accomplices. The police also found a lot of illegal things, so they made arrests and started to investigate. It was time to confront Leonardo, so the police went to the hospital. When Stephen and the officers got to Leonardo's room, the man started screaming. He was losing his mind because he knew what was happening. He probably feared this moment since Benny's and Thomas's visit stopped, and he knew there wasn't much he could do to get out of the situation. It turns out that the substance they found in Benny's collar had been identified. It was cocaine. Leonardo and his accomplices were drug dealers, and they were using the cat to get drugs to the old man. He was an addict, so when the cat didn't show up, he experienced withdrawal symptoms. That's what made him so grumpy and irritated. Stephen couldn't believe how the story was unfolding. Leonardo and his accomplices were drug dealers. They worked out of the house he had visited, which is why they didn't open the door when he showed up. But thanks to the doctor's actions, Leonardo and his crew had been found out, and there was now enough evidence to arrest them. Shortly after everything went down, Leonardo was transported to a prison hospital to await trial. The doctors predicted he had only a couple of years left to live, so life as he knew it was over one way or the other. His accomplices were also awaiting trial, and Benny was completely alone. There was no one left to care for him. The good news is that Benny did have a happy ending. After all the cat had been through, Stephen wanted to make sure he had a good life. So, he helped put the cat out for adoption. After the news came out, Benny became quite famous in the community, and a lot of people were interested in his story. Eventually, Stephen decided he wanted to adopt Benny himself. He had grown attached to the cat, and he thought it was a perfect fit. Benny would have a loving home, and he would also be able to go to the hospital every once in a while to lift people's spirits. It was a win-win for everyone, except the criminals. What do you think of how Benny was used? Let us know in the comments below. This story is a great example of how important it is to take action or speak up when you see something that's not right. Don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one.